Test 1 2 and 2. Test 1 2 and 2. Hopefully I got the mic better. Got to get it up here on my my device. So here are the man. These guys get loud. So here's the recap. We've already done game 1, game 2, and I showed some of Hero vs. Clem from Valencia 2022, which was just a few months before this. And while Hero ended up losing in the semis after beating Clem to Dark, who would go all the way, a few months later here in Atlanta in the good old US of A, Hero would go all the way, but not until he made a comeback in a hard-fought race against Maru, and then a ginormous comeback down 3-1 against Bunny in the finals. So there was just some replay commentary by the broadcaster guys. I'm just going to try and listen to myself for a second. I can turn them up a little bit because I just adjusted the in-game sound. So oh, now I got the mic closer. I gotta be careful. So here it is. There's MARU in the red in the lower left. There's my that big yellow mouse pointer is mine, and then in the upper right you're going to see in a second Hero. So let's see. Let's move the mic a little bit closer to me and try not to yell so much. There he is from Dragon Phoenix Gaming, Hero. So this is another exciting game. It goes around 14 minutes, which is another somewhat long game, especially for a Hero win. You know, as I've talked about a lot, Hero usually wins very early, like between 4 and 8 minutes, with just early harassment and then an early attack that the other side's just not worth. I'm sorry, is not ready for. But if he's unable to get that early victory, Hero's still working on his macro in the background, so that if the game goes long, as this happened in game 2 where it went like 25 minutes, he's gonna have a ton of warp gates and other structures to get units in with their upgrades right away. Here they're just talking about the signs, nothing particularly important. Both of these guys are great broadcasters. Rotterdam, the Dutch guy in particular, is hilarious, who does the color commentary. And now MARU is trying to do early harassment because it's really the only way to stop Hero's early harassment. I want to point out the waterfall map, as you can see in the mini map at the bottom left, is a very, very small map. There's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's only about a dozen places where you can get minerals and gas. And so small maps, Hero's not going to be able to create the giant fortune that he normally collects. But it will allow him to attack early and often. I think, just like I say that Hero does, or I should say, Hero's wins tend to be either very short or quite long. If it's a middle amount of time, like as we'll see here, 14 minutes, it usually means that his early harassment, as he's doing here, didn't do enough to slow the economy of the other player, and then as a Protoss player, he just doesn't have enough time to build up his own macro, so that he'll be ready for a long game coming up.
There is a stalker now. Stalkers are the real problem here, right? Because there is no bunker. One marine is very low HP, so this is still going to be annoying.
So here we are, about 3.5 minutes into the game.
one kill on the low HP Marine. He has extra gate base.
And you can see them building the bases. Again, MARU likes to build these sort of super bases, amoeba bases, as I've been calling them. Hero's already got 2 bases going. I assume he's going to go to a third. Nope, he's putting in a... No, he put a proxy pylon right outside of MARU's base. And this is the early hero attempt that goes for the first 6 to 10 minutes to try and just end the game early on with harassment and then a bunch of stalkers into the base. Now keep an eye on the bottom left in terms of the supply, because what you're going to see is that Hero is right down here with the yellow, which is your number of workers. He's gonna have a worker advantage pretty much this whole game, which means he's gonna have a money advantage the whole game. And so even though the unit comparatively sort of goes back and forth in terms of overall power, which is this red number here, the fact that Hero's able to keep a lot of workers and a lot of economy is going to keep him ahead until he can finally finish it off around 14 minutes. But unlike last game where he was on the offensive and MARU was specifically playing a defensive game, Hero is going to end up winning this by playing defensive and shutting down attacks by MARU on Hero's base, where it seems like MARU will have the army advantage by then, but Hero's economy is just too strong. Hero's already up 15 workers, and so you can just see the money coming in.
Scouting information for him ever since that Reaper died doesn't exist.
I don't know if the announcers are loud enough, but we're just going to have to assume that they are. I have them quietly in my ear, so as not to be too distracting. So, again, one of the reasons he was able to throw a proxy pylon in the bottom left, as they call it, a proxy pylon, is because this is such a small map. I was going to say level. This is such a small map. And there goes the proxy pylon, but he's already done some early harassment using that proxy pylon. And as you can see, already putting out siege tanks in siege mode right next to his base, MARU that is, right here. He's nervous because he knows this is the type of map. And after seeing what happened the first few minutes with his economy getting somewhat wrecked, MARU is not going to take any chances and is going to start siege tanking his base, as opposed to trying to move the siege tanks further out and get the middle ground, the neutral ground, which is so important, but especially for Terrans controlling territory. They may not need 7 bases, may just do, on a map like this, only 3 or 4 at most. Hero, of course, is always trying to get 1 million bases. You want to move those siege tanks out onto the high ground at choke points in the middle of the map to prevent the other side from getting close to your base, because they can't even move through the middle of the map. But they're already talking about, you can see in the far left here, there's a blue dot. Hero's so good at getting out those warp prisms and turning them into, mobile pylons, basically, so he can beam in his bio units. As we've been seeing, you can see up to the upper left the units that are in it, and then production. Usually what happens is Hero does an early starport, I guess it's called, was it a Stargate, for just a couple of either Phoenixes or Oracles, just to harass the other side. But he prioritizes getting a ton of gateways so that by the time he does his first major attack in the 9th or 10th minute, which we'll see if that happens in this game, he can already beam in a bunch of units, and he doesn't go much past 2 or 3 robotics bays, because those units are so expensive, and he likes to use them as kind of a support to his larger bio army. But he's always producing out of those robotics bays once they're up. Here comes an in-base drop, semi-surprise attack. by MARU, which is normally Hero's move. Doesn't get a ton done, and as you can see again in the bottom left, Hero is maintaining a double-digit lead in workers, more than a 25 overall lead in supply. He's ahead in offensive powers, but even at 9 minutes with all these advantages, he's still harassing, just using zealots in MARU's base here. And MARU's having to keep retreating his units. He's having to unsiege his tanks. And look at that. He just have a war prism is just sitting above MARU's base. This is really funny, as they talk about how, you know, and I've mentioned before how Hero's not specifically out to embarrass his opponents, but he's not afraid of doing really slick maneuvers that have that effect of kind of humiliating them a little bit. He'll even use a force field to keep them stuck out of their own base or stuck in their own base. Anything he can do to slow down the economy and distract, as he now has 4 bases to MARU's 2. The worker split is huge. But again, we're seeing a much higher level of discipline by, sorry if I'm screaming. We're seeing a much bigger, discipline, or I should say much better discipline by Hero, because normally by now he's attacking with his force. Okay, here comes his big Protoss death ball. But even though he has advantages across the board with all statistics, he's being very patient, because MARU's doing that thing again where he only takes 2 or 3 bases, but really sets up a strong defensive shield of ground forces mostly, because Protoss is mostly ground forces, especially with Hero. And he's going to yet again, at this point, MARU that is, play defensively and dare Hero to come attack a base covered with siege tanks, ravens, and then of course Marines and Marauders, which are being healed by a whole bunch of medevac units. But Hero's actually retreating, at least to his warp prism. He's got a warp prism here, which is close to MARU's base. And he's sending some back to his base. He just beamed in a bunch of units, and now he's splitting those units. So I'm wondering if he's going to attack from 2 different angles. So we're 11.5 in, which is normally when Hero's second big attack is. But he's actually playing a more conservative and safe strategy, which is going to pay off for this game, where he, again, is mostly spending his money, which is quite large. Look at this. He has over a 30 worker lead over MARU. So the money difference is just massive. Now, MARU has now increased his army supply well above Hero, but that's just because Hero is going to be saving his money while increasing his warp gates so that when he's ready, he can beam in a whole bunch of units at once. So here he is getting recharged back in the base. You know, he took the base. Oh, look, he's got one in the east now. So now Hero's got 5 bases to like 2.5 for MARU. But he's a little afraid, as he should be, of this base, which is towards the center, because it's kind of exposed by, or it should be exposed to MARU's forces. And this game is only about 1.5 more minutes. As you can see, the economy of Hero is still well above what we got going on with MARU, but MARU's going to attack because he has a very good force, but MARU knows he's way behind on economy and won't be able to catch up on this tiny map where Hero has been dominating with workers and economy from the beginning. And so MARU is going to do a very well coordinated attack between these 2 bases, which are right next to each other, for Hero. But Hero is going to repel it. And again, MARU double digits, well above Hero in army, but well below workers and thus economy. So he's still going to try and push. His micro is not quite as good as Hero's, but now Hero is building disruptors. That one got destroyed. But now he's going to be using disruptors defensively as opposed to what he normally likes to do, which is to put him on the offensive line and help that push into his opponent's base. But he's got a bunch of immortals which can soak damage, and he just keeps churning out disruptors. which he has some huge shots to nail MARU units. Again, I was going to say MARU had a double-digit lead on forces, but now they're almost equal in forces, and now Hero's a full 30 workers above, so he's way richer. Now MARU's having to retreat. Those attacks by MARU that were a last-ditch effort because of how poor his economy was didn't work, and he doesn't even let Hero start an attack on his base before giving up on game 3 and giving in to Hero, because Hero did his, early harassment thing on MARU's workers, got a lot of them, got his economy going super fast, and then, sort of turned the tables and forced MARU to leave his giant defensive structure, or I should say sizable defensive structure, to come attack him. Here's some replay action from the announcers. This is a perfect example of a game where even when it looks like you're down in your army for long periods of time and the other side is attacking you or preparing to attack you, but if you establish a dominant economy early on and maintain that dominant economy throughout, especially with Protoss, with a player like Hero, where he's constantly building warp gates so he can beam in a whole bunch of units at once. And so he's able to bring in a bunch of blinkers, a bunch of blink stalkers, and zealots, which are basic units. But you add those disruptors, which he misses some, but are used defensively just to keep MARU back. He lands a few of them, and MARU is just not able to get any economy going, and so he has to attack the base, or the bases of Hero and try and win just with micro and some luck, but he's not going to get it, and he does GG, as I'll pause it here briefly. That was actually, even though that was over a 14-minute game, it felt shorter than 14 minutes. Now, usually when a 14-minute game feels short, it's because the winning, the player who wins that game is actually winning a lot earlier, and it's just a matter of closing them out. This one went fast just because it was very exciting back and forth action. But Hero trusted in his build order, and he trusted in all of the money and resources and expansion of bases that he had going on, and coming in with the minerals and gas and so forth. And MARU is way smart of a player and knows, I should say MARU is such a smart player that he for sure knew about the economic deficit that he was suffering very early on. And so, while normally around 12-13 minutes, Hero is doing his second attack on the base of his opponent no matter what. Here he actually sat back and flipping the tables and flipping the script a bit, dared MARU to attack him with a very strong force overall, considering MARU's economy was so poor. But just like MARU is such a smart player and knowing what's going on with the other player on the board, Hero is as well, maybe even smarter, because he does way more scouting and he does it earlier on. So he's aware that he has a huge money advantage, and he just had to survive. Let me just jump back to those last few minutes. He just had to survive those last few. So here's at 12 minutes where Hero did try and attack to the newest MARU base in the sort of central north, but didn't get very far. And so he does something he doesn't normally do, Hero that is, in retreating his forces to the base, because he managed to save those units, but they lost a lot of their shields and hit points. So he's going to bring it back to base, recharge their shields, and MARU, knowing that he's way behind in economy, but ahead in army power, he's going to do a desperate attack on this three-headed base of Hero, where this middle ground is actually surrounded on all three sides by Hero's bases. The base that MARU ends up going after here and not nearly getting enough penetration or damage. I mean, he briefly goes to this one, but the one he's mainly attacking here was the natural second base of Hero, and he's hoping he could get lucky and micro attack his way into Hero's main base and end it with the force that he has, but he just doesn't have nearly the force at 60 or 70 army power against a, you know, numerically, Hero has a much smaller force and hasn't had much success penetrating Maru's base. But Maru has been playing a little sloppy throughout the series, including the first game, which he won, and certainly, or at least making some ill-advised decisions. Sloppy is probably a little bit of an exaggeration. But he knows because of Hero's... I mean, look at this. Maru right now has only 3 minerals and 400 gas. Hero is sitting on, because of his 30 worker lead, this money total is going to keep going up. Or I should say, is going to accelerate in its increase, if that makes sense. The money coming in is going to accelerate its pace, even though he spends the money almost as fast as he can get it, because Hero is constantly building infrastructure and units, no matter what. Here it is, Maru's last-ditch attempt on Hero's newest base, but it's got a whole bunch of shield generators, because it's a small map, and the early, or I should say, the 3 or 4 bases per player are so close together that you can really defend 3 different bases at a time, as you can see on both the mini-map and the main map with Hero, with his now increasingly sizable Protoss force. He hits a bunch of disruptors, and Hero is so good at that. There's really no one close to Hero, and not just using disruptors as a defensive tool, and there it is, but using them as an offensive tool, but using them as a defensive tool that turns offensive by taking out a bunch of his opponents as that opponent tries to get into his bases. And so I don't know if Maru waited too long, but the reality is, as we just go back a little bit here, you know, the 20 and now 30 worker difference in favor of Hero is so dramatic that Maru had to try and do a desperate attack against Hero and hope to get lucky, or that Hero's at a position, but Hero's economy is just too good. And here it is. Yeah, the announcer just says we don't know how he does it, because it looked like Hero was way outnumbered. But if you're following his unit in structure, build order, and just making sure that he has tons of money in the bank, plus he's got shield batteries as defensive recharges for his forces in the bases. Here comes some replay, so that he could go back to the base, defend his inferior Protoss force, or at least it was inferior on paper. And I should add, not only is it inferior in terms of numbers, but Maru's ahead on upgrades, and Hero is either behind on upgrades or isn't even bothering with them, because he's got too much else going on. This was at 10 minutes, 40 seconds. Which was a little bit late for a first Hero attack. If he's going to do his first attack at 10 minutes and a half, or here 10 minutes, 44 seconds, he certainly normally has a much bigger army than what we see here, an army supply of 46. And so if you didn't know about his economy or his giant advantage in workers, you'd go, oh, this is just a suicidal attack on a well-defended Maru Terran base, and it's all over. But really, this is just an extension of what Hero does in the first 9 or 10 minutes, which is harass long enough for him to continue to expand bases. He's got 4 here, but he's establishing a 5th here, is Hero, which is, I believe, going to get established before the end or I should say did get established before the end. And so Maru is going to make one last-ditch effort on Hero's base, but by then Hero is just sitting on a ton of money and income and enough units that are very well composed in terms of the number of different types of units. Army unit composition, as we call it. But as you can see, well, some of the shield generators went down. Hero actually invested over here in the shield generators. So that's part of why MARU's attacking here, is not only does this base, as what they call the natural base or the second base, lead directly into the upper right base, which was the starting base and the primary base of Hero, but he's afraid to attack this, whatever, this is either the third or fourth base over here. You see my yellow mouse, and on the mini map over here, slightly to the west of due north. It doesn't have static defenses or really a lot or any units, but it does have shield batteries. So all Hero has to do is, even though he's behind on upgrades and doesn't have the number of shield batteries in here that maybe he would want, you can see him belatedly trying to get upgrades. And then MARU, when he realizes he can't get up here, he's going to try and go up to the side base. But it does have the shield batteries, and so he knows that all of these stalkers can easily blink or be transported to this northern base that has the shield batteries, which will make it even harder to bring down, regardless of the apparent differential in army units. But as I mentioned before, and we'll keep talking about, Hero doesn't like building or spending money or time on static defenses on his bases. He does like building shield batteries, so when he recalls all of his units, he can then charge him up with a shield battery and then send them back out to defend and then go on their own offensive. But he's not even going to have to do that because MARU, on this tiny map with so few resources, knows that Hero has a ton of money in the bank that he hasn't spent yet. And so this 50 unit to 78 unit lead is going to disappear extremely fast for MARU. They did a shield overcharge, but as you see it now at 1352, not much long later, MARU's still hovering outside the three ramps of the three sort of outer Hero bases, but now they're almost equal in army supply, and because Hero is able to maintain the bases as MARU attacks with a combination of just units plus some shield batteries and a couple of random defenses. It's just a very tough position to be in, to try and go up three map. Even if MARU had a bigger force and he could split his forces to the three bases, it's just really, it really favors the defenders on this small map, where they have the high ground on all three bases and they all feed into this low ground middle area, which MARU just can't get through on. Maybe he should have gone for one of these southern or easterly newer Hero bases, which would be less well defended and not surrounded on three sides by Hero defenders. But nope, he's doing a last-ditch effort in this game, knowing he's way behind on economy, is MARU. But now the disruptors are coming out, and everybody knows Hero is absolutely deadly with the disruptors. And so, ultimately, as we're going to see, I don't know if they'll show in the replay, MARU is going to surrender now, I think. He's still fighting a little bit, is MARU. But he's going to surrender in a second here, is MARU. And if you look on the mini-map, Hero, when the surrender happens, Hero is not even in the middle of the map. He's certainly not in the most recent expansion. Usually when you're losing, you'll at least put up with your opponent who's ahead to go after a base that's not fully developed. But again, being a small map, that puts Hero right outside of his first two bases with those stalkers that could blink in and be so deadly so quickly. Plus the, beam me down Scotty transport warp in drops with his warp prisms in those areas as well. And so, MARU is too smart of a player and can read the writing on the wall. You can see the units up here. Not a ton of stalkers, but he does have a good 4 disruptors, 3 immortals, which is more than Hero usually has. But he's starting to realize that there's a lot of anti-armor stuff going on from MARU in this series, and you need those immortals to both suck up damage and protect the weaker units from those attacks, but also to attack those units because Immortals are so powerful against other armored units. And so any siege tanks, but certainly all these Marauders, which are considered armored units, are not going to do very well against these 3 Immortals. And again, MARU being so smart, and then we're going to take a break and we'll come back for games 4 and 5, which I might do at once, but we'll see how it goes. MARU's so too smart not to know that the only advantage he had for the last 5 minutes was his, apparent army power. And the reason I keep calling it apparent army power is because it doesn't include upgrades, and it doesn't include stuff that's being built or structures that are being built. It's just the supply that's taken up by units that are already in play or about to be produced. But upgrades, if they were to show what I call a true power ranking, which would take into account upgrades, which would take into account big splits in the economy, as you see here with Hero now having a full 30 worker lead. And MARU, just to close out this game 3 here, which is very exciting, MARU knows that his only advantage was in army strength, and he was way behind on economy. He tried very valiantly through a number of different base entrances to do any kind of damage or hopefully destroy and thus gain territory in Hero's base. It just doesn't happen. And now he knows that Hero has at least as good of an army, if not better. Hero got those first couple upgrades done finally, so he no longer has any upgrade disadvantage against MARU. And so this is truly an advantage of Hero against MARU because upgrades cancel each other out to a certain degree, and the money income from Hero is just ginormous. And with this tiny map and how good Hero is at both playing the micro management game with units and groups of units, but also how quickly and sneakily he can get into his opponent's base in numerous areas at once and just end it. MARU knows that if he let this game go on 1 or 2 more minutes with more Beamins, Warpins coming from Hero, that Hero would quickly penetrate this undeveloped third base and then jump immediately into the primary base and just end it. And so MARU says, you know what? It's a best of 5. I played a really good game 1, games 2, and this one, game 3, I lost, but I'm playing better now than I did last game. And is able to extend the game past 14 minutes despite Hero's giant economic advantage. And so MARU just says GG and getting ready for a game 3. So there's Hero. And MARU is now going to call for an extended break, starting, I believe, in either the quarterfinals. As you can see, this is the semis in Atlanta. And again, after we finish the Hero vs. MARU series here, which has 2 more games, and Hero will end up winning 3-2, Hero goes to the finals, playing Bunny, also from Korea. It goes down 3-1 to Bunny, and ends up coming all the way back to win 4-3 in the Atlanta Championship. But you players are allowed to request 1 extended break during these games in the later rounds. And when MARU goes behind in these later rounds, especially on the verge of elimination, and also coming out of a game where he very well, if he had just been able to preserve and protect his economy a little bit better, Hero would have MARU could well have managed to win this game 3, but that's not the result, and he only has 1 left. So we're going to take a quick break and then do 4, and then which is let's see how long it is here. Game 4 goes not very long, about 4.5, 5 minutes. And then game 5 also only goes about 4.5, 5 minutes. So here, MARU asking for a break, a rest break of longer than just their normal couple minutes isn't going to do anything. And in fact, it gives Hero a time to breathe and decide that he's going to go into his classic Hero mode in terms of attacking early and often and trying to not just disrupt the economy, but destroy the economy of his opponent within 5 to 8 or 9 minutes before that normal giant first Hero attack and just end it early. He's going to be able to do in both games 4. Let's see what map they end up with game 4. and then we're going to take a quick break. Here's interviews with the player. So go to YouTube and watch this stuff, guys, because they're great interviews. So they're going to be playing the Data C map in game 4, which isn't tiny, but you can see here because they spawn 9 opposite corners, but somewhat towards the center. Hero on sort of the center west, and MARU sort of in the center east northeast, but not fully northeast and southwest for the players. It's actually a relatively small map now, and this isn't a giant distance. Looking at the mini map down here, this is not a giant distance between those two bases because of where they spawn. So while this would normally be considered a medium-sized map, it's actually a small map because of where they spawn, because they're a full base length, or at least sort of half a base length closer than they would normally be. Hero's going to win this one quickly and then win the 5th game fairly quickly as well. So we'll probably do both of those at once. But we're going to take a break on the stream here very quickly. Let's get queued up to the beginning of that match. Let's see here. Just take a quick breather, and then we'll be doing games 4 and probably 5 at the same time of Hero taking down MARU on his way to going to the finals against Bunny and having a historically great comeback against Bunny to win that one 4-3 after being down 3-1. Thanks for joining me, and we will be back on very shortly to do Hero vs. MARU games 4 and 5 in the semifinals, Atlanta 2022, DreamHack StarCraft 2 Masters. Thank you so much for joining. Be back in a bit.